This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to this session on how to clear your clutter and transform your life, which I know is kind of a big statement. To be clear, it doesn't happen all at once, but it is a process that getting it started is this profoundly powerful thing that it starts to form a river that is kind of unstoppable in the right direction. So even making small changes in the end really are transformative, and it gives you more and more energy to keep going. And I feel like that is really important to hear, because thinking about taking on one's clutter can itself be really de-energizing, and it can be hard to imagine how you're ever going to get that far. I remember when I started taking on my house kind of drawer by drawer, and I would look at how long it took me to do one drawer, and then I would multiply that and think, I'm never going to get through my whole house. It's just not even going to happen. But that isn't true, because we develop muscles, right? Skills and determination. We become more discerning. And that's one of the first things we're going to talk about, is kind of how to get the right energetic stance to be successful. And I'll be talking about the tools that you need. There are some actual physical tools that I'll be talking about, what some of the bins and labels and things that I use. By the way, super simple, because I think actually one of the biggest mistakes that gets made in the organizing world is thinking that you have to have some super complicated, expensive, color-coded, whatever, in order to do this. And often that's the barrier to even getting going. And so I really want to remove barriers and teach you what you need to have more fun doing it and feeling more successful and having more energy to keep going. So I'm really grateful that you've chosen to put aside part of your day to be with me. It's really, really an honor for me. And I get so disheartened when I hear that people feel helpless. And I get so excited when I hear that even one little thing that I shared, or maybe that you might share with each other today, made the difference. And so I'm really confident that while not every single thing here is going to be an aha, you will come away with at least a couple of things that I believe will make the difference. So I'm really excited. Thanks again for joining me. So as you can see, we're recording, and I've got some folks here with me, and I've invited them to let me know on chat if there's anything kind of right at the time that they want to talk about. And I may wait to actually bring that up. First, we're going to get into our system of how do we even want to approach cluttering? Why would we do it? Not cluttering, decluttering. I did send this little handout to those of you who registered with me, and I'll be kind of speaking to that a little bit. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But the first portion, the many faces of clutter, is, I think, really valuable. It's, I think, expands our idea of how clutter can show up, what forms it can take. Again, recognizing that everybody deals with all these things, right? Unwanted gifts, just in case items, things to read or to know, photos, repair items, items to return, and on and on and on. So it's just a reminder that this is a human issue. There's nothing wrong with you. And that we just need to get better and more conscious about identifying the particular forms of clutter, and then how to remove those types, because they've definitely got some of their own challenges that they present and some of the emotions that they bring up. So I also talk about clutter in the body. So stagnation in the body in this little handout, whether it's being overweight or being just inflamed, having inflammation. All of these things can reduce our energy level and the energy with which we have to address some of the clutter in our space and our lives. The fun part about that relationship is that often, if we haven't been successful shifting the things in our body the way we want it, by working in our space, we may all of a sudden spontaneously lose weight, feel more motivated to get out for that hike, whatever it might be. So I kind of like it. It's like starting somewhere will kind of take you everywhere, which is, to me, very thrilling. I talk about the clutter in mental form, self-talk that we accept from others, people who maybe label us as lazy or, whatever the thing might be. We have our identity often that we took on in our family of origin. All of those things are also a form of clutter, I would say. If they keep us from being our most essential, vibrant selves, they are a form of clutter. And so again, the gift of addressing our physical stuff is we might find ourselves addressing some of these belief systems in a way that we either didn't even know we wanted to or needed to, or we simply didn't feel empowered to do. So again, so exciting. Just by dealing with the mundane of something in my household, I might get a big insight about who I am and what I want to keep and what I'm ready to ditch. And I have a really amazing story that I might get to about that I had with a client. Clutter in spiritual form, I liked putting this on this handout because it's subtle and easy to miss, but sometimes we get so caught up in looking for yet another system, yet another answer from outside of ourselves, that we don't spend the energy looking inward. And there's a lot of wisdom in here. So grateful you're coming to me and getting some answers, I hope, and support from me. But I want to really empower each of us to know that, you know, in each moment, it might be like, and I have enough information right now to get going, right? I don't have to wait to have it be perfect or know one more thing. I'd like to talk about background clutter. And I think this is becoming more critical in a time where our cell phones are constantly dinging or vibrating or what have you. But those auditory background things, and even having the television on, are more interruptive than we might believe. And they've done some really interesting studies about how long it takes to get your attention back. So just having a ding go off, what it takes to get back to the thing that you were doing, whether it was being plugged into a heartfelt conversation with somebody who's important to you, whether it was, working on a writing project. I know we've got a couple of artists, in fact, and writers in our group, and so on. So something to become conscious about that has largely become unconscious and in the background. I want to bring it forward so we can make better choices. On the bottom of that handout, I have a whole category called the cost and the payoff. And the cost of clutter is a really important one to put our attention on, because identifying what the cost is to you is often what will motivate you to do it. It's what I call kind of developing your higher purpose. So that when you get stuck, when you open a closet that is just overwhelming, you don't just close it again. Or when you're picking up an item that is like, I don't know, you don't just like, oh, okay, I'll just put it back, or I'll leave this for later. Like that will be the time to engage your determination of like, I've got a higher purpose. I know what clutter is costing me, and I'm not going to let it keep being a thief. I'm going to take it on right now and making this decision on this one object or what have you. Some of the costs I give examples are confusion, procrastination, frustration, irritation, anger, with self or others in our household, hopelessness, exhaustion, feeling harried, embarrassment, fear, sense of failure, anxiety, and depression. In fact, I will just point out that low-lying objects, things that are on the floor themselves, are more depressive. So it's not just clutter itself, but even where it lives can have its own cost to us. Injury. Have any of you been injured because of clutter in the household? Yeah, I'm seeing a few, like, yeah, I know a couple stories actually I can think of there. Poor role modeling for those of us that have children or other people in our spaces. Stagnation, limited vision, guilt, and we could probably add to the list, right? So the other category is the payoff of clutter, which is a little more subtle and perplexing. People are like, how is there a payoff to clutter? Well, I've had people in classes, the last 20 years that I've been teaching this, admit some part of me has felt like if I have clutter, I can never die. Like I was like, wow, I love that awareness. Other things of feeling of control over life because you've got stuff, feeling safe, feeling like you have enough. Obviously, we still have a whole generation of people who grew up in the Depression. or who, maybe you're younger than that, but grew up in a household where there was always that feeling of lack, or will there be enough for me? I have a friend of mine who's got this great phrase. She's like, can't I ever have anything nice? And it's mostly said as a joke now as an adult when like something breaks or gets dirty, but she's really referencing that feeling from childhood where she just felt like she never got to have anything of her own that was nice. And that can easily set up our adulthood where we may hunger for more stuff than what really ends up serving us. And what's exciting to me is at any time we get to go, I'm ready to start changing that relationship with my stuff and that emotion, those emotional triggers becoming more conscious. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, one of the other things I mentioned was a rebellion, a response to fastidiousness. Some people are like, no, when my household growing up, you couldn't put anything anywhere, or my mom or my dad or whatever would be upset. And so now their sign of freedom is to just be able to put things everywhere, right? So it's kind of amazing how we all get here to wanting a shift with our stuff. On the back side of this handout is really where we're going to be kind of digging into more of the meat, if you will, of basically how to approach our clutter, actionable things to do, and how to set up the system that, like I said, is just my little system that I noticed works and is really repeatable. After many years of teaching classes in decluttering, I realized that people really did need help in person. And so I started doing it in person. And wow, what a great learning experience of how differently people work and so on. And yet all the ways that we're actually the same. So I've got enough confidence now in my system that I think it's pretty transferable to most human beings. And so I'm excited to share that with you, and then obviously have you adapt it in your life. On the other side, there's actions for removing clutter. And these are just kind of fun little quick things that you could do. So you might get some ideas for like, all right, I'm not ready to take on the closet that I really want to take on. I want to get a little energy, a little juice going, get that river flowing. I'm going to remove everything off the front of the refrigerator and put it in a box or a bin. And if I want to put it back up, I can. And obviously, usually by the time, I always say leave it off for like 9 days at a minimum if you can. We love the number 9 in feng shui, which I'm also a feng shui consultant. You might put it all back up. Chances are you won't, but a lot of times people are reluctant to remove stuff because it's scary. And so I think just knowing like, hey, you're in charge, if you want to put that all back up, you can. Let's give you a 9-day breather, let your eyes adjust, and then let's see how you feel about it. I think I want to actually start off with 2 quick stories, if you'll indulge me, because I think they're encouraging, and they'll hopefully bring us all into a place of hope if you're like sitting over there feeling already a little trepidation of like, oh, can I do this? And oh, is this going to be hard? So the 2 stories, the one I referenced a little earlier that I love telling is this woman that I worked with who hired me to come in. And she had a really lovely space, a lot of art and stuff, a really lovely aesthetic. So by no means a like, oh my God, this place is a nightmare. But consistently, I started coming across patterns of things, of stuff stuffed away that were really symbolic. And so like her bedside table was constructed out of like vintage suitcases, which mine were actually the same way, but hers were filled with like unopened bills and mail when we got in there. And it was like, whoa, that's a heavy thing to be keeping at your bedside, right? I mean, you could just feel that. Then we got into under her bed, and there were all these like things for, helping roll out your back and kind of physical therapy things and stuff, most of which actually didn't work. They were broken. Also, wow, underneath your bed, really big place to be keeping things that essentially aren't helping your health and kind of represent broken body stuff, right? Wow. Lastly, what we found under there was one of those really long telephone cords. I think we're all of an age that might remember those when all phones had to be connected by a cord. And this one was like 50 feet long. And so I brought it out and I, looked around. I'm like, you have a cordless phone, right? She's like, yeah. And I was like, so do we need to keep this? And I kind of learned enough about her along the way that I wasn't just like, oh, this can go. I was like, do we need to? And she goes, and she stopped. And I was like, do you have any more of these? She was like, oh yeah. And she left the room and she came back with a very organized gallon bag of more of those. And I was like, wow, can you tell me about this? And she just started crying. And she said, I'm 45 or whatever she was, and I've moved 40 sometimes in my life. And I've always been afraid of not having what I would need. What was cool was this, otherwise unimportant telephone cord brought up this really powerful conversation, a powerful insight, and kind of emotional cleansing for her. And from that point on, our whole appointment was really a powerful process where she saw each choice she made as an opportunity to rewrite that deficit mindset. Right. So this is the way that, number one, we might want to sometimes stop and go slow when a certain object brings something up. It's also the reason I won't just go in and get rid of your clutter for you. I've had people ask, and I'm like, oh no. We want each of us to have those moments of difficulty, because that is where the juice is, the revelation, and the kind of coming to a new place is. Another story about arriving at a new place actually has to do with my dad. And when he retired as a professor, he had a lot of stuff. He had an office that was kind of famous for having like nowhere to hardly get in, barely sit, papers, books. And when he retired, that all came home to his garage. And then he started living in his house all the time, of course, versus going to work. And things just started piling up more and more. And we said, hey, Dad, maybe you want to, you're becoming kind of a recluse. Maybe you want to come out and move out by us in Wisconsin and so on. And he's like, no, I could never move. I have too much stuff. And I was like, all right, then I need to come in and clean every couple of weeks, because this is actually getting dangerous. And you need to pay me, because otherwise I'll resent you when it returns every couple of weeks. He's like, okay, cool. And so when we started that process, I had actually just had a car accident. And so my body sometimes was not up to like, I'll come clean. So I would kind of call him up and say, Dad, I'm really sorry, can't come this week. And he'd be like, oh, honey, don't worry about it. It's not that bad. And then I'd go the next week. And of course, it was horrible. Progressively, by the end of a year, if I wasn't coming, he would be like, hey, honey, it's really getting bad. Do you think you could make some time in your schedule to come and clean? I'm like, sure. And I'd get there and I'm like, not that bad. His tolerance had completely changed. And this was a really, really important lesson for me to have in this, course of a year over this time with my dad, was somebody who I had lived with my whole life and who was a piler and a stacker, and talk about low clutter. I mean, he just wouldn't even put groceries away, or if he did, the bags would just still sit on the floor. And categories, mixed categories. I mean, kind of some of the worst, heaviest forms of clutter. That was my dad. And so, I could tell a million stories, and maybe we'll get to some if they feel pertinent, but I want to get to yours later on in our time together. But I tell that one in particular because I think it is such an indication of the importance of getting started. And I'll tell you some of the principles that I used with him, and that some of you might use if you're living in a household with other people. And it's not just about you getting to choose, oh, I want this surface clear, that I got to practice this stuff with him. I've also gotten to practice it with clients who then got back to me after decluttering some months later and said, oh my God, that thing worked. It's working. And so I'll be sharing some of those tools with you as we go. I just want to say thanks again for being here. I'm just loving looking at your faces here on my little Brady Bunch of Zoom channel. And so anyway, I'm touched. So some of the systems, like I said, we've got this how to approach decluttering on the handout. But basically, number one, I already referenced it, is identifying your higher purpose. Is it to reduce your stress? Is it to, as an example, I don't have a great word for this, but make it easier for you to get out of the house with the things you need? The keys, the coffee mug, the thing that you were going to return to a store, or the thing that has to go with you to drop your kid off at school, or what have you. And just that can be such a big deal, because that's a part of daily life, right? So that might actually be one of your higher purposes, is just to like reduce the stress of getting and going a place. Is it to reduce conflict with the people that you live with or love, and on and on? So your higher purpose, what would that be? Do you want to have more attention and time, say, for a creative project or the creative part of you? Anyway, I'll let you ruminate on that. And if you feel like popping that into the chat, feel free to do that. I'd love it. The next thing is really about setting yourself up for success. And before you even set up the system, you really need to set up you if you're going to do a decluttering. So I treat decluttering, first of all, like an athletic event and a sacred event, both. So number one, I don't wear white and I've got tennis shoes on usually. Hairs back, especially because, by the way, even if you think you're not working with stuff that's dusty, you are. There is dust, even if you're like just going through your clothes, dust. Putting on music, if that is something that just keeps you rocking, lighting some incense, a candle, getting always water, beverage, being hydrated, right? So that's setting up you for success. And this is a big one. When I work with clients, they're paying me, so they're more willing to do this, but I'm like, you need to tell everybody you are unavailable and you turn off your phone and you don't answer it, you don't look at it. That is it. We are together, in our case, for like 8 hours. Now, I'm not suggesting that your first launch into your next decluttering after our class today is an 8-hour decluttering. Maybe it's a 1-hour thing. Maybe you don't know how long it's going to take. You're like, I am going to tackle my dresser top or my entryway table because it's driving me crazy. Great. Make sure that, anything that's important time-wise with other people is taken care of. Turn off your phone and go. All right. So the system is, ideally you have a system on which to declutter, and that's going to depend obviously where you are and what you're working with. If you are in a bedroom, absolutely cover your bed with like an old sheet, even if you're not decluttering on the bed, because again, the amount of dust that gets produced. But then you could use the bed for kind of a partial decluttering surface. It might be your dining room table, etc. I love these little tables that are folding tables. I got them at Home Depot. I think they were like $50, but they're 2 feet deep and 4 feet wide. They're much smaller than those like 6-foot tables that people put out in their backyard for a barbecue. They are easily movable. They're super lightweight and malleable. I've put them in closet or in a hallway before because there was simply nowhere else to set up my system, right? So they're small enough that you can set up a system anywhere. And I've set mine up in kind of an L shape with a little gap because I need to get back there. But an L shape can be really useful sometimes, depending on what I'm working with. If we're working in someone's basement and there's a lot going on, there's a lot more categories, I own 4 of them. I might have all 4 of them set up in a U shape, or one behind me, for example. Maybe there's a table behind me that's all the stuff that is needs to be sorted into, like they're going to get consigned, and we're going to separate them into piles of clothing versus antiques, right? So depending on your categories, depending on how much there is, how you set up could vary. But I think an L shape is a really good, simple system. And if you don't have that, you could use, like in my dining room, I've got a dining room table, and then I've got like a bench that people would sit on. You could use that as kind of your side item where you might have some of your bins. Because what I want is this to be easy for you physically. We want to almost never bend down to the floor. Even though, as yogis, it's a good idea. It keeps you fit and loose, right? But we want to reduce physical resistance for this process because it's already intense enough. So ideally, though, I have some bins on the floor, but they're things I can just throw stuff into. I shouldn't have to go down and pick up very often. So I'll talk a little bit about that here with this system. So the tables, like I said, I just love those. I love these Rubbermaid bins. They don't have to be the brand Rubbermaid, obviously, but I love them because they are very resilient. They don't crack or break the way a lot of those clear bins do. And clear bins actually create more visual clutter. And I'll have so many people fight me on this. They'll be like, no, but then I can see what's in there. I'm like, a label will do. Winter, outerwear, camping goods, photos, memorabilia. A photo will do, because otherwise your eye is actually trying to make sense of all that weird stuff that's smashed up against the surface of the clear bin. So I feel that way both about bins that you're going to use for storage and bins that you might do sorting into, like we're doing today. Now you can also use banker's boxes, and that's what I've currently got. I wish I had a better view for you, but I don't. But that's what I've got under this table. Are 3 banker's boxes. The first one says donate. The second one says friends and family, because I almost always have something that I'm either returning to somebody, or I'm like, I'm not really loving this, but my sister would love this scarf, right? So always have friends and family if you're me. And then I have a sell box. I don't always really actually follow up and sell things, so I've kind of stopped doing that as a category. But I know that that is a common one for people, so I kept it here today as an example. You can see I've got it, written in pretty decent size letters, bright Post-it note. If you're doing ongoing declutterings, you might decide, hey, I'm going to buy my whole own system of banker's boxes. I get these through Quill Corporation, which is like a business supply, but you don't have to be a business. And it has like 12 of these, I think. Yeah, 12 of these banker boxes in them, including the lids. And what I love about that is that if you're taking on a big area over time, you're ideally would love to just set up your system and kind of keep going. Maybe the tables get broken down, boom, boom, put out of the way. You take those banker boxes, you put the lids on them, and they get stacked in a corner of the area that you're working in, right? So it becomes possible for your house to not be crazy, and you can continue your life, but pick up where you left off, and you don't have to remember where did I put that stuff? Where did I stuff it, right? And it's labeled, so you don't also have to go, now what did I put in that box? So the banker boxes, to me, super useful. They collapse, they can go back in that box when you're not using them. The other thing I use is a bin, and this one is just different, not for any good reason, although I think it's helpful to have this bin, which is my gathering bin, and I'll talk more about that, be different than the things I'm sorting into. So why do I do that? Because when I am decluttering, I'm going to go to a closet, or I'm going to go to a drawer. We're going to do a little part of a drawer today for fun. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to put stuff in it. I'm going to come back to my sorting spot and sort. And, color coding is actually just one of the quickest things for the brain. That's, been scientifically proven. You can help yourself as you age, by the way, do that more. It really helps. But so having this kind of the gathering bins, if you will, be different from whatever you're sorting into is helpful. I mean, you could use laundry baskets, however you want to do it, depending on, again, the amount of stuff that you are taking out of a space. Over here, the categories that I have up top. So down below, by the way, those are all things that are leaving the household, right? They're all out. I've decided they're leaving. Up top, I'm putting the ones that stay in the house. Now, I just did that for convenience. You could have them switched if you wanted. It doesn't really matter. So the up top ones, the stay in the house, one of the most important ones is other rooms. I sometimes put disseminate, but this is key, because how many of us set a thing at the bottom of the stairs, or you want to put it on the corner of the table or whatever it is? No, put it in the bin, and then this bin will move around the household with you as you put things away when you're done with your decluttering for the day. Depending again on your house and the kinds of things you're up against, you might actually separate that into multiple categories. So I'm thinking of a mom that I worked with who had 2 little girls, and we were constantly coming up against little hair wowies, right? And I was like, all right, I don't want to have to pick these up again every time that I'm trying to, put stuff away. I'm having to deal with all this little piddly stuff. So we then just took some smaller bins or a little basket. You could use a coffee can, like whatever's on hand, and make that the sub-containerization, as I call it, for, okay, girls' bedroom, and even inside girls' bedroom, little stuff, right? So maybe there's the stuffed animals in the bigger part of the bin, and then the hair wowies. I realize we don't all have little girls with these categories, but I know you are able to extrapolate from that. So I like having these little guys on hand for stuff like that. I also like to have on hand plenty of grocery bags, because the donate hopefully will get full. And this is how you can get stuff out of there. So I'll often, again, it depends on the type of objects that you're donating. Sometimes they might need to get wrapped so they don't break and that kind of thing. But I will try and have some grocery bags just standing upright in the donate box. And then I can kind of separate like clothing from breakable items or however, again, you see fit, but it can just be helpful to have some of these on hand. I also like to have on hand these little guys, you know, like little gift bag kind of things, little fruit bags for example, friends and family, when I'm like, oh, this, I need to ask so-and-so if they want this book or blah, blah. And then I will take a Sharpie and write their name on it. And then it goes in the friends and family bin versus me having to see it a week later or whatever and be like, now, who's that for? What was I thinking? Right? So it's just an act of kindness to do that to yourself. The other tools that I have that I really love, I actually have in my little tool bag. They're not very special or interesting. You probably own them. They're markers, they're Post-it notes, they're scissors. In my case, I also have needle nose pliers and things like that. And I have this decluttering bag because of my work with decluttering clients and the number of times that we were doing a thing. And then it was like, oh, we need to cut this tag off. I'm like, do you have a scissors? And I'm like, yeah, somewhere. And then they're gone for however long, right? I'm like, no, stay with me. So even for myself, if I'm doing a big decluttering, I will usually, I mean, in my own space, I will usually bring my decluttering bag along. That's not a must necessarily. It's just, again, I'm trying to catch you before you undo yourself and go looking for scissors and then get overwhelmed because you go into that drawer and you're like, oh my God, you know, is my whole life crazy? No, it's not, but you can feel that way. Another tool that I love, somebody already brought up papers being a big challenge. And wow, can I relate to that? I think everybody probably can, you know, and then there's emails and it's a really intense time to be alive where I think we have a lot of stuff coming at us that we don't want. And then the stuff that we do want and we need to manage. How do we best do that in a way that aligns like with our personality and the way our brain works? I think one of the most frequent things that I have heard from people that I've worked with, and one of their biggest reasons that the clutter is happening is that they're like, I need it out where I can see it. If it's not out where I can see it, I'll forget about it and I won't take care of it. I can relate to that. And I think it's just kind of, again, a common human thing. The problem is if we keep doing that, often then other stuff lands on top of the thing that we wanted to not forget about, right? So it's its own cumulative problem. These are these project files. I also get these through Quill. They're technically called poly-transparent pockets. This one is the colored grouping. So you can see they have all these different colors. I think it's 5 of them. They also come where they're just clear. But I'm going to show you what I do with mine. I made a pay baby pay file. And this sits on my desk for the reasons we just named. And sometimes other stuff lands on top of it, but it gets cleared away pretty quickly. And I always have this yummy green showing up, underneath all the other paper goods. So it kind of is like, hello, you, take care of me. And I don't put anything in here that is not like money and time sensitive. I don't put like, oh yeah, I really want to use that coupon, or, oh, I do want to reply to that friend of mine, or I do want to register for that thing. No. Unless it's important and time sensitive, which I guess registering for a thing could be if you've got a deadline and you don't want to miss out on that. But this is basically the stuff that if you don't do it is really, there's a high cost and a high stress. And you could do another one that is like follow up or blah, 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 right? So you could come up with your own system and then basically you just notice if it works and then you revise it because again, we're all really, really different in how we think and how we function. Let's see, there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. Oh, yes. So the way that I've got it set up, and you'll see this when we do a little work together, is I've got it set up so theoretically I would be moving left to right. And again, everyone's a little bit different, but I think that's really common for how a lot of people work. And so as an example, I would set down my, get this stuff out of the way, set down my stuff to be sorted. And again, we'll do a little sample in a little bit. But these are the principles. I'm only going to pick that item up once, and it's going to go somewhere. It's not going back in the bin. It's not, and this is the one I see a lot, it's not just going to get set here. Oh yeah, I'll think about that. Oh yeah, I'll think about that. No. Let's think about it now. And so that's where we would start to ask ourselves questions like, do I love it? Right. And we've all been hearing more about that, right? Does it bring me joy? Yes. But I've always asked, like, do I love it? Do you feel it in your body? Like, oh my God, yes, I love this thing. Or do I need this? Is this useful? And sometimes one of the great gifts of decluttering is you actually find something that you needed and you couldn't find. So believe me, there will be payoffs in addition to the ones that you're hoping for. So maybe it's neither of those things. And you're kind of like, I don't know, I might need it sometime. I'm not sure. How do you address that? Well, so I have a series of questions that I will often ask myself or someone else, which is, do you have other ones like it? Or do you have one that you're already using? In other words, is the one you're already using better? Is this just a secondary repeat version of that same item? In which case, maybe you could let it go. Right. And then the question is, how do I let it go? Is it something that has to be recycled, et cetera? So by the way, the other categories that I have down here is a garbage can and a paper bag for recycling. This is my garbage can for the day. But what you want to do is have a garbage can that you are not stealing from your kitchen or somewhere else that's high use, because inevitably that will create more clutter, right? Someone's going to go into the kitchen and they can't throw away the thing, or you can, and you're going to be like, ah. So if you're doing this with any regularity, kind of have a garbage can that is your go-to. As far as recycling, one of the great challenges, of course, is that now we've got like electronics recycling, and what do you do with that? There are a ton of great online resources now, thank God, that you can usually figure that out. So when it comes to recycling, again, you might end up having to expand your categories. So maybe you've got two bags. One is just the regular recycling, and then the other one is stuff that is specialty. It's light bulbs and batteries and electronics or what have you, right? In the electronics thing, I'll just mention as an example, and this is why it can get so cumbersome for people. They might be like, well, yeah, I do need to get rid of this computer, but I have to get the information swiped off of it first, right? Oh, that's another layer. This is where I think it can be super helpful to have a notebook or a list that you would run of follow-up actions, right? Contact a company that does computer sweeping. Boom. Ask Shirley if she wants that scarf of mine that she admired, on and on and on. Call this place about repairs, or, getting videos transferred into digital. So you want to have somewhere that you can make those kinds of notes. Don't feel that you should try and remember them. That's really unfair to ask that of your brain, because you're doing other important stuff with it. So I am going to take my bin and go get an example of goods. And Jason's going to help me. Actually, he's going to follow me around with the camera. Just so you get an idea of what we're doing here. I'm going to take a small bin, because what we're doing, this little sample, is just teeny. But come on with me. Come on for a ride. I feel a little like Mr. Rogers or something, So along the way, I'm going to just point out a couple things. I want you to notice feng shui principle is having items of life force and beauty. And this is one of the things that will help keep clutter from forming and support you energetically as you're living your life, but also as you're decluttering. And I'll be pointing out some more of those later on, but I thought, and we're just going by. So we're coming into my kitchen area, which has kitchen-y stuff, but I think like a lot of people, the kitchen is also where I do other things. It's where I take my vitamin supplements. It's where I have Post-it notes that I write, oh yeah, got to do that thing, or call so-and-so, or I leave Jason or other people notes. So a lot of other things happen here. So we want to set up places where those things live. And I know you can't really see in here, but I have sort of vitamins down one side. And then I've got all these little things that I bought at, I think they were at Target in that like dollar section when you first go in, and they're kind of a nice size. This one's got all my pens and stuff like that in it, and a fingernail file. Now, there are organizing people who would tell you can't have that with your pens, and yes, I can. It's right where I need it, right in the front every time. So I've also got a little bin here with, it's got my glasses mostly in it. I've expanded my need for different kinds of cheaters. But it's got other stuff too that kind of landed there and doesn't really belong. And so we're going to do what I call a kind of a weeding it out. If I'm just doing a weeding out of something, and I know it's really just like garbage and then everything else is going back, or garbage and disseminate, I might just actually go get 2 little baskets and like do it right here, right? A little quick weed. We're going to take it over to our sort and do it that way so I can kind of use the system we've got set up. I've also got like this is my little place that I put my Zyrtec, my arnica gel, etc. for quick grabs. I don't have to go up to the bathroom every time I grab that. So again, some people will be like, well, that stuff doesn't belong in the kitchen. Actually, I think it does. This is where I need them, and this is where I do these things. But I want to create sub-containerization, as I call it, the proper container, so that I know where to find it and it's not getting intermixed with other things. And when I open my drawer, I don't feel overwhelmed, right? I don't want to start my day that way of like, I am a bad person because everything's intermixed, right? I'm kind of being funny, but I know that these things do weigh heavily on people. It hits you. So we're just going to go back to the little zone. And I decided to do a very small thing with you guys because I think it's plenty for you to get the idea. And I want to get more into some other categories and stuff with you. So I'm going to just take this out because it'll be easier for you guys to see. But I've got, let's see, eyeglass cleaning thing, eyeglass covers, a lint roller, which I don't ever use, but I think somebody needed once when they were here. So I went and got it from upstairs, some glasses, etc. Okay. So I've got this kind of a mixture of categories. How do I do it? All right. Well, I've got lint roller, goes back up into the bathroom. I don't really use it, but it's great when someone else needs it. So other rooms, great. I've got a glasses case. You know what? The cheaters that are in here, I only ever use here. I don't put them in covers and take them anywhere. So I need to decide, do I want to keep these covers at all? Because I guess I'm thinking about it. My first instinct was like, oh, I should put these somewhere else in the house. They don't need to be here, but I'm not, I mean, these are going to die and get broken and then I'll get new ones, but I'm not taking them anywhere. I have cheaters in my purse that I do that. So you know what? I'm going to donate these. There we are. All the things that are leaving the house, I've got down below. Again, you might do it differently. And oh, guess what? Another one. It's out. All right, an eyeglass thing. That's awesome. Yes, I need one of those. So that could go back to where it came from. I'll just put that in the bin for returning to this drawer. More glasses, also going back. I don't actually have to look at those because I know I need them. These, however, I realize, they're kind of crummy and overly small. I think they were the ones I started with. Donate more eyeglassy things. How many do I need? I know I've got more of these upstairs and downstairs. I do not need 4 of these here. Oh, wait, 5. All right, which one do I like the best? And 1 is plenty. I figure I give it a wash, it dries in seconds. So I'm going to keep the pretty one and donate the others. Woohoo! Oh, another pair of glasses. At which point I might, for example, sit down, get out my cheaters so I can read which numbers these cheaters are, figure out which ones I need to keep. I keep some around for my family, right? So then I might stop, evaluate, ditch what I think I don't need, or maybe someone in the family wants it and it goes in friends and family, right? So I'm a bad person, actually. I should put this bin that I'm sorting back into because it's going to go back to, in a sense, other rooms. It's going back to the kitchen. I'll put it there. Oh, yeah, this is the case that went with those other little guys. It's out of here. Pens. I would strongly recommend you at some point sit down with all your pens and check that they actually work. Mine probably do. I'm not going to make you sit through that. That'll go back there, but to get reunited with their friends in that first little bin. And oh, cool, an eyeglass fix-it thing. Do you remember I was saying there will be treasures? There will be rewards? I needed one of these. This is awesome. All right. I actually don't even know what that is, so I'm throwing it. And a calculator. Does it work? It does, but it's teeny. And guess what? I use my phone now, which is amazing because most of you who know me, I'm a bit of a Luddite and I'm very hard to train to use technology. So the fact that I use my phone is its own miracle. Right. Donate. And oh yeah, it's a magnifying glass. Given the level of vision issues that me and other people my age in my family are having, I'm keeping that. That's more treasure. So then I would take this back. I would actually put back what goes in my little eyeglass, etc. bin. And when I go back in there, I would reunite these with the pens. You get the idea, right? So very small amount of stuff, but also went really quick, and it would have gone quicker if I weren't explaining to people, right? If you were just doing this in your own head. So this is, to a point, one of the places that I want to kind of make a firm encouragement, which is you start small. So it might be a whole drawer, or it might be part of a drawer if you've already got kind of containers. It might be a whole dresser, or it might be just your dresser top because there's already plenty going on there. And again, we want to get the energy flowing. And if you have a success, you're just going to be more motivated and more able to get through it, and you're developing those muscles. So some of the rooms that I know people in this group have said they're interested in taking on, I've heard closets from a few people before today. When it comes to a closet, it is hard to kind of do it in parts, I would say. That is one where I would take on the whole space. Again, you'd prepare. If it's a bedroom closet, you cover your bed, get your other surfaces. If you can bring in a table, even a card table or whatever you got to do, a piano bench to help you out. And you would pull everything out. Now, when you're pulling everything out of a space, whether it's out of a closet or you're emptying a whole room, it really, really helps to not think about the objects as you're taking them out. So don't be like, oh, do I want this donut? Don't do that until you're at the system. You're just removing it. If you come across obvious garbage, a gum wrapper or whatever, by all means, right? Toss that right away. But otherwise, like, nope, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Put it in the bin or in the bags or the laundry baskets or whatever you're using to corral it. And that all goes over somewhere, maybe on one side of the room if you've got room in that room. If not, you're bringing the whole thing out maybe into the living room, because that's the only space you've got to do it. And then you start bin by bin, basket by basket. Up it comes. Do I love it? Do I use it? If I'm not using it, is it because it's not in the right part of the house? And this is what I think is kind of fun is, a lot of people think that clutter is just stuff that you shouldn't have. And that's not true. It's sometimes that it's living in the wrong place for it to be useful. It's that there's too much in any one space. So even if you've got a lot of things that you love, if there's just too many of them, you can't get the door open or closed easily. You can't get your clothes apart to get a hanger out. That is clutter. There's just too much. And that's when you have to decide, all right, I'm going to take on that category and pare it down. Clothes, by the way, one of my favorite categories, because I do love clothes. One of my favorite things to ask, and you could apply it to other stuff, but is, if I didn't already own this, would I buy it again? So a lot of my favorite clothes I got secondhand, and either someone gave it to me or I bought it at a secondhand shop. I might have only paid $5 for it. But the way I know the favorite one is I'm like, oh, I would pay $50 for that right now. Like if you were like, I'm going to take this from you, I'm like, no, I'll give you $50 for it. Or if I saw it in a store again, I would buy it again. That's a very different feeling than like, well, yeah, it's kind of cute, right? So a big part of doing this work, regardless of what category you're up against, is getting attuned to your, like your antenna, your internal antenna of, how does it make me feel? Do I feel kind of meh? Or do I feel, oh yeah? Or do I feel, ugh? Obviously, if you're dealing with things that, are family oriented, right? Things you've inherited and stuff, the might be much more complex, and we can talk about how that shows up. But I find those questions to be super useful. Like, would I buy it again? Or if I do love it, but there's too much in this one area, how can I refine the space? And that can be a challenge if you're not very inclined that way naturally. But in general, again, thinking about sub-containerizations, whether it's baskets or boxes or bins or what have you, can make a space that otherwise was overwhelming. And maybe all the right stuff was there. Maybe none of it's technically clutter that you need to get rid of. It just was stored in a way that was overwhelming or dangerous or what have you. So I talked before about low-lying clutter being depressive. Let me mention that stuff that's above your head can be oppressive. It's heavier, it's more confusing. You're like, what is that up there, right? And if you go to grab it, the chances of having it like fall down on you are bigger. So it again becomes really important of how things are stored, how they're contained. That will matter a lot to the emotional feeling that you have when you are, living your life and going into a drawer or into a closet. I want to do one more little, actually a bigger ride about the house to just show you a few principles of things. And then I'd love to kind of get into some of your guys' questions and stuff like that. I realized that I did not say the final thing about your system, which is that when you're done for that hour, that dresser top or whatever, you want to make sure and kind of finish up, right? You put those banker boxes in the corner, you take out the garbage, you take maybe 3 bags of clothes and linens out to the car to go to Goodwill the next day. That's a really important next stage of wrapping it up. All right, we're going to do a little tour about it. You ready? Okay. So the first thing I want to point out, and you'll see this show up in other parts of my house, is that in this corner, I've got a pillar with lights on it. And this is a very basic feng shui principle. I promised you I was going to include a few that can really support your space sort of sloughing off clutter or accumulating less. One of them is having corners be filled. And ideally, even by something round, kind-ish, whether it's a lamp or a plant or a pillar. That is going to help the energy continue versus stagnating, landing, depositing, right? And so as we move over here, similarly, I've got a plant in the corner. Perhaps getting a little aggressive. I might have to do some trimming, but it's really been wonderful. And of course, anytime you can bring in a plant or life force, it really supports, again, you, the space. People feel the difference. It's kind of cool. I've got another plant here, just because otherwise, again, here's a weird kind of dead corner. I want to point out above the drawer that we were working in, right? The vitamin pens and all the million other things. Again, a lot of stuff lands here and happens here, notes and so on. That I've got this item of beauty here at the back. And in fact, this is a plate that I bought in Vancouver when I was on a trip there. And I've got it there as a item of beauty that will almost always draw the eye up. So when you, for example, are dealing with a surface where necessarily you've got bills, you've got paperwork and stuff that will be out there, please consider the ways that you can, in a sense, kind of trick the eye, but how to focus the brain on beauty so that every time you walk by, you're not just like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right? So it might be something like this platter. It might be an amazing, vibrant painting, say, over an entryway table where your mail lands or everyone's keys and all of that. Having that item of beauty. Anytime you can add life force, all the better, like those little hyacinths that I showed you that I had on the dining room table. That's a big help too. Oh, good. I'm reading some really fun stuff that's rolling in. Thank you guys for contributing. I talked before about structure, and I just want to kind of point out again, this is a kind of creative way I figured out how to keep my teapots because they're pretty. I like looking at them. I didn't want them away in a cupboard. But if I had them just sitting on the countertop without this little crate, I reused an old wine crate, it would be like, are those dirty? Are those clean? What are those doing there? So the structure itself tells the eye, this belongs here. It's part of the permanent landscape. And then anything in front is the temporary. This is where our dirty dishes land. So it really, really helps with that. A basic feng shui principle as we move on too is that your stove is actually a really important, we call it actually one of your most important pieces of furniture, along with your desk, your dining room table, and your bed. So you want your stove to be clean and a pleasant place to do your thing. I intentionally spent a lot of time searching for the teapot that I love. Because yes, it boils water, but it's also something that I look at every day and I touch every morning. And that kind of intimacy with objects, that kind of choice making will start to also help deflect the stuff in your life that is just kind of meh, it's all right, So if we can, we'd love to love everything we come in contact with. You'll see straight ahead here is another example of filling the corner. right? So I've got these chairs that are not, their backs to the wall or anything. This would be otherwise a very dead space, but this pillar really helps. Moving around. Oh, actually, I'll give you an example of a little centerpiece I made that I had for a while on the dining room table because I didn't have any fresh flowers. And it was just a candle that I bought. And then I found this cool moss at a garden store. And so I kind of made something life force feeling. It's actually greener looking than it shows up in there. And I just used a bowl that is a pasta bowl that I have and made a little centerpiece. I'm going to tell you a fun example of why and how centerpieces can be so amazing. This is one of my other favorite stories. So that woman with the two girls, not that it matters, but it's the same person. What we were working in was her bedroom. And bedroom should be a sanctuary. And I'm hearing from you here that that's important to you as well. And I'm glad you're conscious of that. I think a lot of people think, oh, well, I just go sleep there. And well, first of all, it's sleep. And we know that is a huge part of our health and well-being, but also that what we think and feel as we go to sleep and when we first wake up has a lot to do with how we regenerate, how we feel about then the upcoming day. So bedroom is one of the places I recommend starting, and I'll name a couple more in a minute. But this woman called me to work on primarily her house. She was just like, I don't even know where to start. And I took one look and I said, we're starting in your bedroom because it's the place you can probably have the most control, right? Husband, 2 kids, dogs, cats, like let's start in the bedroom. And as we did, it was really fun when we cleared off the dresser, the weird array of stuff that was on there, including cordless drills and stacks of videos and other random objects. I don't remember now. This was a lot of years ago. And so we did what we did. I took it all into a bin and we sorted it. And as each object came along, she was like, garbage, or, oh, that belongs in the basement. And then a number of things came up, by the way, that were what I created the Ask Dave category. In mine, I actually have the Ask Jason category. So it would empower her to move ahead versus just like, I don't know what to do with this. And her argument against moving it off the dresser, I hear this a lot from people, is like, my spouse will actually be upset that they can't, and then they can't find it and they'll blame me. And this will create a bad cycle. So if you create an Ask Dave box, you always know where to tell them, oh, actually, I put that in your Ask Dave box in your office and you can find it there. So it really reduces resistance from partners, et cetera, if they begin to trust that you're not just throwing stuff out or stashing it where you think it goes. So that was helpful. So we did that. And I said, all right, now we need to create protection. And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, we need to put beauty here to protect the space. And she's like, well, like what? And I'm like, I don't know, like you could go to IKEA and get a candle. And right, I gave kind of this sort of an example. So we spent a whole day together. And I think probably 3 or 4 months later, I got this letter that I remember still because I was just like, I think I cried. I was so excited for her. But she was like, I'm so grateful. First of all, her daughters now want to declutter and they wanted her help doing their rooms because they saw the difference it made and they got all excited. But her husband went with her to IKEA and they went and got this centerpiece and it landed on their dresser. And she said, ever since then, nothing has stayed or landed there for more than part of a day. You know, if it was the cordless drill, he did a thing, hung a thing, saw it the next morning or night before he went to bed, and out it went. And to me, that is thrilling because it bespeaks of the power of this item of beauty to say, don't leave that crapola here, versus the person, the other human having to say, please don't leave that there. Please put that away, which can be just exhausting for everybody. And what's cool is this works for yourself too. I mean, I realize it's not always the other person. It's sometimes our own bad habits, right? The stuff we set that really shouldn't be there. So, what that item is will depend on what works for you. Or again, if it's the 2 of you in your bedroom, it'd be really awesome if you pick it out together. But pretty much any horizontal surface will benefit from having this like hub of the wheel as I talk about it. So I have an example over here in our living room. Huge ottoman. I call it the Ottoman Empire. I just love it. It's super useful. It allows us to do a lot of things here. But it is a big flat surface. So I helped just by getting this tray. First of all, it creates kind of a sub space. It is rectangular. One could also do round, which might be a nice balance actually. But if there's nothing with any height there, I mean, I'm hoping you can kind of see, it's just sort of, right? The space is just sort of dies. So when I don't have fresh floral or something like that, I sometimes grab this, which is actually another favorite item from Vancouver, but has so much life force, right? Because it's glass, so it's got reflective quality. It's more upright. One could even say, take some dried items. I've got some dried eucalyptus here. You could even put something dried there. So, because not everyone's going to run out and buy fresh floral for every surface, right? So there are ways that we can do this that are inexpensive and sustainable. And so that lovely vase will kind of live there, and then I'll move it and I put it over onto the side when I'm not using it and I've got fresh flowers. Another thing that I did to make this space be pretty while being utilitarian is I created a bowl for the remotes. So we have our ceiling fan, our mini split, which was a new addition to our life. We now actually have air conditioning. It's amazing. And then the television remote. And these all just live in here. And I like not only that you're not really seeing them, right, on the surface as you're walking around, because I don't want to think about the television when I'm not watching television, right? But I also like that they're removable. So like we had some family over yesterday evening. If we were going to put out appetizers or whatever, boom, off this goes. I can set it on the floor or a different surface, or even shove it under the ottoman. So this is an example of containerization, but making it functional. It's the right size. All three of them fit in there. It's easy to grab what I want and making it beautiful. And in this case, again, being round is nice. A lot of spaces suffer from too much square, too much rectangular. That in and of itself will actually make spaces to be more prone to clutter prone. I couldn't decide what I wanted to say. So just adding curves can actually make a really huge difference. So swapping out a square coffee table for a round, or putting something round on top of the square, angling chairs like you saw that I had versus having their backs up against the wall. All these things will actually create a space where the energy flows better. In feng shui, we say that basically your home is your second skin. Your front door is the mouth of your home. And we say that all of the breath, the chi, the life force comes in that front door, and it exhales out windows and doors. So if you have the windows blocked by lots of crazy plants or furniture that's too tall, or you've already got a stagnation problem and you've got a space that's going to feel oppressive. So that is, one thing to be alert to. As the energy does that circulating through the house on its way to an exhale, we want it to undulate. Basically, we want our spaces to imitate nature. And I have never seen a straight stream, and I don't want to travel one, right? So the more you can imitate nature, the better. That brings me to the other pieces that I was mentioning of like places you might want to start. Bedroom is big, again, bedside tables, dresser top, and so on. It's the last place that you want paperwork, by the way. But the other place that is really key is your entryway. So it's, if you're kind of feeling unsure, unempowered, you're not sure where to start, the bedroom or the entryway are two biggies, and it can be a big game changer. Depending on how cluttered it is, you might have to like just pull a lot of stuff out of there, or you might be able to do more what I'm talking about of the weeding, right? Of like, oh, this is too much, or this doesn't belong, or I need to create a system for seasonal stuff. It doesn't have to all live out at once, right? That's huge. Not everything all at once is a big one. Let's go back over to our little zone over here. I'm seeing some questions pop up, and I want to address those. Bedroom was one of the big ones. And I think that, what's that? Oh, it's loud. Yeah, our little rolling rack. It's its own volume here. I'll wait till we get over here. I think a lot of people have had the experience of doing a decluttering, refining a system, making it pretty, whatever, and then feeling like it gets undone. And that can be so disheartening. And especially if you're living with other people, it's kind of inevitable that some of that will happen, right? Thank you. So I wanted to say, part of it is somewhat inevitable. And if you've created a pretty good system or structure from the beginning, it should be easier to maintain, to notice when the system is going awry, and to do what I call more of a weeding or a cleanup, or to then notice and say, wow, the structure, the object that I picked to hold socks, for example, is just not big enough, because, hey, because of where I live and the number of socks that I really need, I do need this many, right? Because of course, maybe you don't need that many. That's one possibility, but I get it. We have a lot of shoes and boots because we have a lot of different things that we do out here in a lot of different weather. So then what would be appropriate storage? So often the system will tell you like, this is too small. We need a different place for this to live, or a different type of object. For example, you can go into all these home goods stores and buy all these baskets. Baskets can be kind of a nightmare. A, they can be big dust collectors. B, often, like if you're using a basket for recycling, the paper can get stuck in the basket and now you're having to pull that out. So depending on the object you're storing, different kinds of storage are going to be more or less appropriate, whether it's a smooth-sided thing, whether it's something with a lid or not, right? That can become really important. I don't know how many of you have read Marie Kondo's work. I'm kind of curious. Anybody? I'm seeing some nods. Basically, overall, love it. I love what her work has inspired bazillions of people to do. And that basic principle of, does it spark joy? I'm all on board. But there are some things that she had suggested that around how to store things that I feel like really set people up for failure. And I'm just going to give you an example, not because you need to go read her book specifically or whatever, but because this is an example of the way we can set ourselves up for failure in how we store things. So I remember her talking about storing t-shirts and any other folded shirt. And she was suggesting you store them front to back, like slices of bread, if you will, in a drawer, which I'm sure looks very pretty. And I love it in Gap and other stores when they do that. You're like, oh yeah, I can see all the folded end and it's so pretty and all the colors. There are two major problems with that. One is, as soon as you take an item out and it's no longer full, the other things can collapse. And now you've got a big mess, and that system you so carefully set up goes poof. But the other is that not everybody can or even wants to be a pretty folder, right? No one, I know lots of people who would never want to spend that much time getting their things folded just right. So I think being conscious of that you might get this advice from me or Marie Kondo, or I see it on some TikTok organizing thing of a certain way to store a thing, but it does not really work well for you. And I want everyone to feel really empowered to be like, yeah, no, that does not work for me. Right? Does that make sense? Because then you're just being undone and then you're feeling bad for it, right? So thinking about the types of objects, how you want to store them, noticing what's working for you, what isn't. Don't feel bad if you have to revise a system. That's the learning curve. But I will say that once you get a system, I mean, when I look around, a lot of the systems I have are things that I put in place more than a decade ago. And then I just refined them and changed them as my life changed, which is important, or I just weeded them out and took them back down to that basic structure. Life changing is really huge, right? Kids moving out, pets dying, divorce, graduating from grad school, all these things we might do. It is really key anytime there's a huge life change to look and ask if your life is reflecting who you are now and reflecting that change. So I'm kind of curious, I want to open out to you guys if that triggers a thought form at all. I'm going to just scroll back a little bit here to get back to paper, because I want to talk about that just a little bit more. So piles of paper, I want to give you an example. I told you about my my Pay Baby Pay file. I can't get you down to my office because it's on a different level and we're on wheels. But if you were there, what you'd see is I have a variety of structure for holding different things. A lot of people I know don't necessarily have an office or even their own desk at home where they can deal with stuff. Or they have a partner who likes to open the mail at the dining room table, for example. If you are going to be doing work at a dining room table or somewhere that isn't an office, it is especially important that you have a container that holds your stuff. So let's say your mail comes into the house, maybe it comes in and lands right in a basket in the front entryway. That can reduce arguments about, hey, honey, where did you put the mail? That basket could then travel to wherever you want to do the sorting, or they do, where you've got recycling available for sure. So think through that and have a recycling bin at the handy where that opening happens. So you're not handling it more than once or twice. If bill paying needs to happen, say on a tabletop, then that's where you would want to have maybe a basket, or it might have a couple of spots that would have everything you need to do that, right? It would have your pen, your stamps, your stapler or whatever, and then maybe a thing that is to file or whatever that would then get carried to where your filing cabinet is. And that's where these project files could be handy, and you could come up with your own categories. But if you just take this stuff and you lay it all over a dining room table, it is heavy, it's horrible. It's less horrible if you've got some of those space holders that I talked about, the center things. And that way, if it's a temporary, you're like, hey, this is where I got to do it, fine. But it's less horrible if you've got those space holders and items of beauty or holding systems, containers, basically. I think that's the biggest generic advice I can give about paperwork. Obviously, you can go deep with paperwork and office organization, and there's some really good, talented people out there too who can help if that's a whole topic that you want to go deep in setting up filing systems and stuff. But I'll be honest, I have a filing system and I use it for some things. And then this sort of category of which I have a lot, which is ongoing projects, I don't actually file them. I have them either in those file things that I just showed you, and they live in stacks, or they live on a shelf that has a little note that says family or clients or health. And that stuff just goes there and has those labels. It works better for me. So again, to empower you to notice what does work and what doesn't, and don't feel like you have to follow anybody's system or go to Target and buy a bunch of organizational tools thinking that's going to make you successful. That isn't what's going to do it. Aha, good question. Why not skip the gathering bin and sort items immediately as you pull them out from wherever? Brilliant question. So the main reason is that people usually miss, or they underestimate the things they might come across and the various categories that might fulfill. As an example, oh, friends and family. Oh, I need to ask somebody about this. Oh, it goes upstairs or downstairs. Oh, I need 2 different bins because I've got, a ton of stuff that needs to go into the basement or the garage, and then the rest of it's in the domestic part of the house. So that is the reason to always use a system. Now, you might have had that system set up right closer to where you're pulling stuff from than we did, but still putting everything in that bin. And it really helps clarify for your mind. This is the stuff that I'm sorting. I'm pulling it out, and what, right? I'm touching it once. I'm asking myself some poignant questions, and then it's going somewhere, which might be back into that drawer or that container like I had. But a lot of it moved on, right? Now, if you're just doing what I call a weeding, usually you could get away with just pulling a few things and then tossing them in the garbage can, right? Like I do that as a matter of daily life. I'll just see a few things that don't belong and I'm like, oh yeah, no, boom, right? Or, oh, that belongs upstairs, and I'll just take them upstairs. But generally, if you are doing even one drawer, you're going to have way more things than should fit in one handhold to take up to where you're headed. And as you're putting things away, you have to set the whole handful down. Do you know what I mean? So I go to the bathroom, I end up setting my whole handful of upstairs stuff down on the bathroom, putting a thing away, and then I have to take and things are falling. You get the idea. So it's a way of really simplify and reducing just the frustration as you go. And if you have to stop partway through, maybe you get a phone call and you're like, oh, I got to go. When you come back, there aren't these weird piles of things that were supposed to make it to the garbage can or supposed to make it to upstairs. It's just all ready for you to come back home, make dinner, do whatever you got to do. Maybe there's bins setting on the dining room table. Boom, you can move those off in 30 seconds. And you're ready to get back to your daily life. And not everyone in the household hates you for embarking on decluttering, right? So anytime we can reduce our own resistance or the resistance of the people we live with, the better. And that's one of the things that helps is just those containers as you go. Thank you for that. That is a great question. What are some great systems rules of how long to keep something? I love that question because it's one that you commonly hear in the decluttering world of like, if you haven't worn it in more than a year, get rid of it. I like her example, e.g., if you haven't touched it in X years, discard. What is your experience with clients on that? E.g., our garage is full of camping stuff. We haven't camped for 15 years. Great example. Number one, I don't go by the year thing because I have a lot of things, for example, an evening gown that I'm not wearing every year, but it still fits and looks good on me. And I do actually try it on each year to make sure it still fits. I'm like, yeah, I'm keeping it. I ask myself the question, if I was going to go to a thing, would I be excited to wear this dress? Yes, I'm keeping it. The camping gear, it's a great identity piece. Maybe you were somebody who camped once. Maybe you haven't camped for a long time. Maybe you'd like to become someone who camps, maybe not. And that question might be the defining factor. And it might help you say, yeah, you know what, I'm really done with the camping thing. Or if I'm going to go somewhere, I'm only going to go in, a pull behind or whatever. Maybe I still want to bring the hammock that we own, but I don't care about the tent anymore. Or maybe I want the tent because our grandkids might come with us or what have you. So it can help define, does it still have a life with you? That's the question I ask myself. Does this have a life with me? Because if not, it's just waiting for a life with somebody else. It might be somebody's favorite thing. I have a great example of how useful that question is. I had a woman who hired me to do her basement with her. And there was a lot that was obviously garbage because she had put all these clothes down there to donate or to consign, and then it had flooded. So, nature helped answer it for her. But then there was this whole shelf of all these bags and boxes. And I was like, what's all this? And she's like, oh, these are things that were my mom's, etc. And they were all little curio things, like little glass tchotchke things, of which she had a number upstairs in her house. And so we started going through and I would just ask, oh, well, how about this one? And she's like, oh my God, isn't that just the cutest? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, do you love it better than one that's already on your shelf upstairs? Because they're full. And that's a great discernment. And she was just like, well, no, I really like the ones that are up there. Okay. Back in the bag it went. We did not get rid of one of those items that day, not one. And I left feeling a little bad. I'm like, all right, well, we got rid of the garbage, but geez, she paid me for a whole day and we packed and unpacked and repacked these little. So she calls me about a year later and says, I'm ready to take them on. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't know. Let's see how this goes. So I'm unpacking. I'm like, what about this one? She's like, oh my God, isn't that the cutest? And then I'm like, well, yes. And she's like, someone else will love it in the donate. And we did that for every single item. And she did not pick out one that she liked better than the ones upstairs. She couldn't do it a year before, but somehow that somebody will love it thing stuck in her head. So, you need to find your own mantras, but these are some of the ones that I have that have worked for people. And it allowed her to see that this thing that she thought was absolutely adorable was living in bubble wrap inside of a Target shopping bag in a musty basement. And she allowed it all to move on. It was just stunning and thrilling. So trust that too. There might be some things that you really just aren't ready to deal with yet. There might be a whole category of stuff, especially if it comes to, say, someone who has passed on, memorabilia things. One of the things that can help a lot is getting like things all together. So if you've got photos all over, I would recommend stage one of the decluttering of photos be that you actually go to all the drawers and all the weird places they're stashed and you bring them all together before you even begin the process of trying to sort them. And I do have ideas on how to sort photos, which I can go into too if that's on anybody's list. But as an example, just going and getting them all together allows you to see how many you have. You can do this like if you're cleaning a kid's bedroom too, for example. Rather than each time you come across a book trying to put it away on the bookshelf, go get all the books together off of the floor and everywhere there are. You can do this with yourself too, not just children, right? Get them all together and go, are these actually going to fit on that shelf? I think not. So it's now time to pare down and look at like, what are our favorites? Or to say, you know what, these actually are all precious to us, where they're all keepers and we need a second bookshelf. Versus cramming and stuffing and damaging the books and your ego alongside with it. Anyway, the folks who have asked the question about the sanctuary, I would like to return to that for bedroom space, because I've touched on this, but I think it's particularly poignant with bedrooms. Once you have addressed the clutter that's in there, and by the way, if there was paperwork in there, it should not go back in there ever, right? That is the one place I can say confidently, no paperwork. Once you've cleared away the clutter, what you bring in terms of beauty and life force is, I think, more poignant in the bedroom than probably almost anywhere, except maybe right at your dining room table. So making sure that it's stuff that is just, you love, it's luscious, it's beautiful, it makes you feel peaceful. All of that can be really important. In feng shui, we would like the bedroom itself to have a lot of what we call water energy. And water energy is more flowy. It is, well, the color, they often say the color black or dark blue, but the items don't have to have those colors to smack of water energy. But imagine the difference of a curtain, for example, that is kind of a hard pleated sort of canvasy type thing, or something that might be even a little iridescent, a little bit textural and tactile and kind of sexy. Maybe it puddles a little bit on the floor in a decent way, like not huge. Obviously, we're going to trip over it, but versus being just very tailored and cut. Having it be, like I said, luminescent or a little shiny will give it more that feeling of depth and of water than something just flat. Same thing with bedding. So if you look at the items that are in your bedroom and just go ask yourself what you love or don't, and swap out those items for stuff that are really like, just yummy, that alone will help add to the sanctuary feel. Television would be another thing that I would say ideally doesn't belong in the bedroom. It does not contribute to sanctuary. If you can't win that argument with, say, your partner, perhaps having something that you drape over it so that you're not looking at this big black frame. I mean, you would never hang a piece of art that was black that big, right? So it's just a weird looking thing. And so if you drape it with a beautiful scarf, that will help it from just sort of staring at you. And it would also perhaps make you and your partner more conscious of when you're choosing to take that scarf off to actually watch the TV in the bedroom. Which I've had people say, like, no, I really want to keep it in there when we want to watch a movie and cuddle in bed. You know, that's a great conscientious choice at that point. Yeah. Anything else bubbling up? I'm so excited. You guys are touching on some great things. My husband and I were just handed a huge challenge. A cousin passed. He was a Vietnam vet. The house is now ours to manage the purge. Wow. Sort, sell, etc. It's full of motorcycle parts and other collections of valuable items. We don't know where to start. Suggestions for this mammoth kind of project estates. Wow, I'm sorry. Sorry for your loss of this human in your life, but also the incredible intense burden of what you're left with that's your responsibility. A few things. I actually just spoke with a friend yesterday whose mom has passed, and she and her siblings are similarly taking on an entire household. I don't remember how many thousands of square feet. And their mom had really great taste. She loved travel. So, right, it's not a house that's full of garbage. That would be the easy part, right? You just hire a company, in they come. So a number of don'ts, first of all. Do not bring anything of the person who's passed, your mother, your cousin, whomever, and put it in your basement or your attic thinking you're going to deal with it later. Anything in your basement or attic is going to be, it's just going to get like planted deep roots, and it will be that much harder to get out. It would be better to get a storage unit if the things have to get out on a timeline that doesn't allow you to deal with them. And then obviously create a timeline for sorting the things so that you're not paying for a storage unit for forever. But I have seen people's quality of life degrade so quickly because they just brought all that stuff into the house. And then they even, set it places, like brought home mom's china or whatever. Oh, this is neat. I'll set it over here, next to the kitchen counter. And then it's there for 6 months and you're walking around it. So really protect your current space. What I recommended that might be helpful in this case is for this friend of mine, as I said, number one, in her case, her and her siblings, go in and get rid of all the stuff that really is very impersonal to you at this point, and that doesn't hold any significant value. So just do a weed on that, like all the dishes, the clothing maybe. Or in the case of this friend of mine with her siblings, I said, maybe you all want to go and pick if there's an item of clothing that is special to you that you want to remember your loved one by. We all did that with my dad. We all took like one of his wool shirts. And then it was very easy to just, okay, somebody, and you could even ask a friend for help then. Please go ahead and bag up the rest of the clothes. And this is super exciting. When you can make the donation meaningful and energizing to you, what if all of his clothes goes to the veterans, right? Or other objects that you could ask them if they have need for. I've had a lot of women be really energized, for example, to give clothing that they paid quite a bit of money for, maybe the tags were still on, and to give it to the women's shelter, who gives it to women who are going to apply for jobs or start new lives, right? It can be so motivating then to get rid of the thing that you're kind of like, well, I don't know, I paid a lot, maybe I should keep it, right? So how we get rid of things matters. So these kinds of, like, I almost call them like a search and rescue, but they're like a category. Like, okay, go in and pick a few precious things that you want to keep as your own memorabilia of his. Go through and pull out all the category of stuff that, like I said, has no huge monetary value, but is useful. It's not garbage. Decide where you want to donate those things. Then you're left with the stuff that is a little more complex and difficult. But it's simplified and you have more space to work, hopefully, because in your case, with all the items of value and of different types of categories, you might have to kind of pile things like, once you've got more stuff cleared out, let's make a pile over here of all of these, say, precious art that we might need to call an art dealer to come look at, or we might need to take photos of, and somebody might have to send them via email. So there's a project over there. All the motorcycle parts, get in a specialist, but again, obviously those things all together. That just corralling of like items is really, really helpful. One of the things that I've got so much great suggestions from people over the years. I had one family who said what they did with some of mom's stuff that none of them wanted to get rid of, but they didn't particularly want. Because it held memories. They're like, you can't get rid of the lamp that's been in our family for 150 years. They then decided everyone would just swap off and everyone would get the lamp for a year. Basically, it would be like mobile. I thought that was super creative. I was like, okay, that works. So it can be kind of fun to work on that with people that you know. Sometimes your friends might have great suggestions. I hope that's helpful. Feel free to send, kind of follow-ups. I'm seeing letting go of personal journals, paper in all forms is my nemesis. Yeah, paper, I think, is one of the most difficult because it's so dense. I mean, a stack of paper like this can hold so much meaning, so many thoughts, and take so much time to go through, right? So that can be particularly intense. I think at the start, at least, separating types of paper out, again, making sure that the things that are truly memorabilia are separated from daily life administrative management. And you can separate it out even more. For example, we have a box of papers that were my dad's that are in a box that specifically says dad's papers. And I have that separated from our other family memorabilia or what have you, because I want to go through that category with my sisters together, digest it. It was stuff that we didn't have time to do when we had to clear out his apartment. And what sped us up was not stopping and reading every single thing. It was more like if anything came up of like, ooh, that has an emotional charge, we might want to look at that before we get rid of it. It's not a quick glance look at it, but like, I want to look at that. That went in a box. And we still haven't gone through that box, but it's just together. There's no other stuff in there. There's no other family stuff. It's just that. And it'll make for, I think, a great coffee date or wine date or whatever with my sisters. So the more you can separate those things out, I think the better. I think asking yourself hard questions. If you're keeping journals, kind of like the camping gear, have I gone back and read them at all? Have they been useful for me to return to and digest, to get a new renewed sense of myself, of who I was, the journey that I'm on and where I've arrived, right? That I think that can be one of the uses of journals. But if you're someone who you realize will never, ever go do that, then it might be worth asking if it's time to let them go. And again, how we let go of things matters. You might be like, bonfire, or maybe ask some of your friends if they'll come and bear witness. And you might even read some segments and then bonfire. The other thing I would say is if you're still conflicted with a category like journals, at the very least, again, have them all together and only them, and have them somewhere that is not burdensome. Don't have them in a box in the corner of your bedroom where they're collecting dust and you're constantly thinking, oh, I should do something about those. I should do something with those. I had to do this with repair items. I don't know how many of you have the habit of like realizing, maybe you break a refrigerator magnet or a coaster and you think, oh, I need to glue that. And so you set it out on the counter or the kitchen shelf so that you'll see it and you'll do a thing. But I have had that habit my whole life. And at one point, I noticed that I really wasn't doing it. And some of these things had been there for a long time. I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm clearly not doing it. Like, this is the get honest. That's another phrase I like, let's get honest. Am I repairing the things? No. All right. Am I ready to throw them away? Right now, no. All right, I'm going to do the easy thing. I'm going to put them all in a shoebox. I'm going to write repair. I'm going to put that in my tool area or my storage area. In my case, it was my attic at that time. I came across it 2 years later and I was like, oh, I forgot all about this. I'm like, I don't even remember what's in there. And I opened it up and I was like, all right, now is the time. And I went and got my super glue and I glued like 3 items and I threw out like 8 because I was like, yeah, no, can't be bothered. But the other 3, I was like, oh yeah, it's worth it. And I did them all at one time and I was done. So that just corralling of like items and making sure that they're stored in a place that when you want them, you can find them. And in the meantime, they're not hurting you or anyone else's quality of life. Excuse me, I think is really a helpful starting point anyway. How about collections? Oh yeah, seashells, artwork. I am so glad you asked. I didn't show you when we were in the kitchen on the little tour, but the cupboard directly under that drawer that we were talking about is my revolving decoration cupboard. And I got to go in there just this morning because my sister said, hey, do you have any more of those like glass beads that you used to fill in around that orchid that you bought at Trader Joe's? I was like, in fact, I do. I know exactly where they are. They're in a Tupperware container labeled, and they're in my revolving decoration cupboard. And I just went in there and I got them and gave them to her. But that's where I have like vases that I don't particularly want to see or that won't fit on my vase shelf in the kitchen, which is mostly attractive, I think, but they're like big, tall, clear ones that I don't use very often, or lots of little ones. And then things like milkweed pods and shells and stuff that I've kept from trips. And I bring them out as a way to freshen my space, to decorate. Again, when I don't necessarily have the money to go out and get tons of fresh flowers, I'll put like some dried reeds that I had collected from the field and that I just liked so much, I decided I'm going to keep this for next year. So that is a very wonderful way to keep things that allows them to be fresh. Again, we don't need it all out all at once. It keeps them out of my daily life. Now, if I needed that cupboard for kitchen stuff, I would have to rethink it. And I'd go, okay, maybe there's an area in my storage closet where I want to keep decor and revolving decor items. And that would be an option. So again, we need to rethink our systems as life changes, as we move along. But what keeps a life relatively clutter-free and going the right direction is being willing to pause and ask those questions and reevaluate, being willing to block out time for it. And this is really huge. It means literally blocking off time on your calendar and putting up the boundaries with other people, right? And putting up the like talk to the hand motion. If we allow ourselves to be in perpetual distraction, or meeting the needs of everything else and everyone else in the world out there, we will not tend to our space. I would say it's just another version of our body. Do you get to the yoga mat or meditate or even take a few soft breaths each day? Do you even pay that much attention inward, or is it all about out there? And in fact, I didn't start our practice today with each other the way I intended, which was I was going to have you take 3 slow, deep breaths with me. So I think I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to just share with you, those of you who've never done yoga with me, for example, that I know we all benefit from having some kind of daily practice that grounds us in ourselves, in our knowingness, in our body, in that gut. right? Otherwise, how can we ask ourselves, does this spark joy or do I love it? If we aren't even in touch with this antenna that gives us that feedback. So to me, it's very important to have some kind of practice, but a lot of us get bunged up by trying to have too big of a practice. We say, oh, I'm gonna meditate for 15 minutes, or I'm gonna do yoga for a half an hour. And then we keep breaking those commitments to ourselves. So when I found myself in that position, I went back to base level and I said, all right, I'm gonna take 3 breaths with awareness, no matter what. And if I want to go on from there, fine. But I can do that unless like the house is burning down, right? I mean, there's just really no good excuse. So this is my commitment to self. And I'm going to invite us to do it together. If you want, you can close your eyes for better inward attention. You can also close your eyes looking up and in as if you're trying to look behind your third eye point. It's been shown that just that actually helps turn the brain in towards a more introverted state. And then we're going to breathe only through the nose, theoretically. But if you're stuffy, do what you got to do. And I'm going to invite you as you're doing this to look for the pause. There's a place between the active inhale and the exhale that is a pause. It's non-breath. If you love water, you might even think of it like a wave and how the wave comes up on a shore and it seems to pause or hover, right, before returning back towards the body of water. So that imagery can be another way to keep your brain present with what you're doing. Let's go. Let's turn our gaze up and in. And as you're ready, tune in to this amazing container, this body, this being, and begin to watch the movement of 3 breaths, rising and settling. Notice if the mind wanders, bring it back. Inviting you to just notice those simple 3 breaths. How powerful. Yeah, I hope that felt good to you and that it's something you decide to return to if you're not already doing that as a practice. The other 3 breaths that can be really powerful is 3 sighing breaths. They've been able to show that the sighing breath actually calms the amygdala, the alarm center of our brain, and that even 3 of them can have an impact, which I find amazing. They also found that my sighing will actually help someone else relax. So it's a tool that we can offer when we sense that people are just getting a little tight around us. You can, right? I always like to say it affirms that we are whole, we are well, we are safe, we are not in an emergency, everything's fine. I've had a couple of people mention, it's kind of hilarious. They're like, yeah, but when I sigh, my husband tells me that I sound like I'm angry. And then they're like, but it might be because I'm like, I'm like, yeah, you might want to refine it more towards. But I love noticing truly the texture of the sigh. It kind of tells you what's going on in your own energy. How much are you carrying with you that is heavy, that is hard? And just knowing that can be, I think, supportive for your compassion for yourself, but also noticing the need to set a boundary, to deal with your clutter or what have you. That's the next place I want to circle to. I've touched on it, but I think this is so common for most of us that it bears returning to, which is this living with other people thing. And again, my main message that I want to give you is that it's not easy. I don't even find it easy to live with myself sometimes, but living with other people, and that we have a lot of different personalities and habits and relationship to stuff, that it's not easy and it is evolvable. And I want you to hear that even if you're dealing with somebody else and a habit they have with stuff that you are just terrified you can't live with and will never change, it can be evolved. I'm not going to say people just turn into different human beings, but it can be evolved. And so here's some things I would recommend that I've seen work with people. One is you have every right within the space that you're living in to ask that one surface be sort of a sacred space. So if you can't have a whole room, at the very least, a sacred space surface. To me, the dining room table is a wonderful starting point that truly supports and serves the whole family or whoever's dining there, because that is where we take in nourishment. It's a place where we might gather and download about our day with each other and digest and share what's happening inside of this body and being. So it feels like a great, easy starting point. Again, making sure you create an item of beauty at the center and so on, that you maybe predict for challenges like there is nowhere else to pay the bills, that's a flat surface other than that. Then you come up with this little system that's movable and you explain to everyone in the household, this is how this is going to work. Everything is going to get moved off the table when we're having breakfast, dinner, or whatever it might be. It might be the bedroom. It might be, hey, this is the one place you can't throw anything on the floor. Clothes either go on a chair. I have a half dirty chair where I put my clothes, and so does my partner. It's something I learned from my mom growing up, and she still does. And I'm like, makes sense to me. I'm sometimes dressing for yoga, and then that's coming off 2 hours later, and I'm dressing for something else. The stuff isn't dirty, but I don't necessarily want to put it back. So making those kind of rules with people you live with, including yourself, but also creating the system. Like, then you need a chair where that stuff would lay, or a hook system that you would put up where those things would get hung. So predicting. Often the problem can help you predict the solution. In other words, if the problem is clothes on the floor, predict the solution. Oh, do I need a laundry basket that the dirties can go in? Maybe a better laundry basket, maybe a bigger one. Maybe I want to have two of them for the two different people in that household, because some of the laundry is really dirty because of the nature of that person's job and the other stuff not, or I separate darks from lights, right? Like, again, what your structure is will depend in part on what you're noticing isn't working for you. What's landing there and why? Another example I have of this, where subtle kind of putting beauty in the place can quietly encourage clutter to end up elsewhere. I had a woman who had a husband and two teenage boys and maybe a daughter. I think this was a long time ago, but they all came home with sporting equipment and all kinds of stuff. And all this stuff would land on this like hallway bench, directly across from which was the closet where all of it should have gone. It's where the laundry was. It's where the sporting goods baskets were that were designed to receive these things, and the dirty socks should go and all of that. But it would just get dumped on this bench, and it drove her crazy. I said, all right, let's find an item of beauty. Now, we had to find an item of beauty that if accidentally someone put something on top of it, was not going to get like smashed or broken, right? So we were thoughtful. But we put an item of beauty there. I think it was her turkey roasting platter, if I remember correctly now. And I think she went and then got like some decorative like balls that she liked or something and put them in there, something non-breakable. And I got to hear from her about a month later that things had gotten set to the side of each of those platters, but they were little things like someone's keys or sunglasses, and none of that, dirty socks, sporting goods, it all went in the closet where it was supposed to go. But it was just one further step for those people. And that deflection of that beauty was enough to get them there. And again, maybe that wouldn't have worked, in which case reevaluate the system and try again, right? So it's not a simple one and done. It's reevaluate, notice, ask what's not working. And we have to do that even with ourselves, because we have to actually stop and reflect, why am I doing this? Why do I keep setting this thing here? In order to come up with the solution. Yeah. Oh, you guys are asking such great questions. I'm so grateful, because you're helping me get to what I think are really key human common denominators that a lot of us have. Yeah. Is there anything else bubbling up that's just sort of your particular type of stuff, or a feeling that comes up around stuff? By the way, I was talking with a friend on our recent trip, in fact, to Palm Springs, about the value of a beloved mug. Yes, and I can see Kat drinking out of hers right there. It feels good in your hand. Maybe it's colorful. Hers says rise and shine. So it's just like having a little love note, from your mug first thing. Again, have nothing that you don't love or know to be useful, and your quality of life just goes way, way up. And, it's like with food. If you're eating something that is so delicious and satisfying, you're not going to want to keep snacking and going and getting another thing from the cupboard, right? So this applies on all levels. If the more we're tuned in to what's really satisfying and delicious to us, the more we will select things or even people to fill our time with, right? That are resonating at a high level. And a lot of clutter, a lot of flotsam and jetsam will sort of clear itself away, and it'll become that much easier to discern between what is special and sacred and delicious and belongs in our life and what does not and should move on. Anything else bubbling up? I'm looking at faces, I'm looking at the chat. I'm just so excited that we've gotten to so much, but you can see I was talking really fast because I just wanted to get it all in. It's complex, right? We're complex. We have a lot of stuff. Yeah. Has this been helpful? Has each of you gotten a sense of something, yes, that you can take action with?
Yeah, really helpful. I just came off mute just to say that. Really helpful.
Thank you.
Ann.
And thank you for coming to be with us. And your questions were really, really useful. This is how I've learned over the years of like, oh yeah, there's that. I want to encourage you to talk about these things with friends and loved ones. I mean, obviously, especially the people that you live with, but also other folks, because, pretty much everyone I know has some solution they've come up with that we might all learn from. They've got a solution for photos or for whatever. So I think it can be a fun form of intimacy to talk with people and then share with them what we're feeling burdened with and show that vulnerability ourselves. I will say that if someone else's clutter is driving you crazy, tuning into yours and dealing with it is the most powerful thing. And I have this on that handout for that reason. So every time you're tempted to like, oh, I just got to take on their stuff, tune in. What is yours? Is it your wallet? Is it your calendar that's too full? Is it, are you a yes person? Do you say yes to everything? And so you have no receptive space. I did a whole presentation once on receptive space, and that can be in our thinking. Meditation helps with that. That can be in our space. It can be in our calendars, on and on and on. So when in doubt, start with yours, but consider asking directly for support from people in your household and, identifying very specific actions that they can do. Like, I'm asking as a household that we set nothing on the dining room table that does not have to do with eating or sharing with each other. Maybe you want to bring a birthday card for me to look at. Okay, fine. Like I said, or maybe it's your bedroom and you start there. An entryway table, again, a very powerful place to start. And then you might have to educate the people of the household. This is where, keys and sunglasses go, or whatever it is. Or maybe everyone has their own basket. Maybe you have a place where, again, things to be returned get set so that you always know that's the bench I look at as I go out the door. My eye scans that bench, which means you have to remove things from that bench that aren't to go out the door right now. That's a game I have to play with myself a lot, because sometimes I've got things that are going to leave, but I know it's going to be like 2 months until I'm going to have lunch with that friend. So what do? I put it in a storage area that I've got kind of around the corner, and I write a note in my calendar, like, grab this thing for Betsy when you're having lunch, like the day of. And then I see that note and I put it out in my entryway, the night before, whenever I see the note in my calendar. So, I realize that sounds like a lot of steps, but it's a step towards a successful, clear space that supports me. And a lot of it is just asking myself, how do I function? And is looking at all these items on the entryway bench that aren't about soon, are they cluttering up my head? Yes, they are. This is another principle I will tell you, and I have fun. This would be a really fun first practice for all of you. When we're done and you start moving around your space, noticing how your eyes lands on horizontal surfaces and travels them, and how every single thing your eye picks up on a horizontal space you have a thought about it. If it's the floor, I mean, unless it's a piece of furniture, that's where it belongs, right? If it's the floor, if it's a countertop, your brain will see it by your eyes, and your brain will note it, and it will have to have a thought about it. If it doesn't already belong there, I told you about those things in my kitchen counter. That is the permanent landscape of my kitchen counter. I don't have to think about those. So I've just find what belongs there, and then everything else, I have to see it every time, which is how I remind myself to do things. I have a drum that you might have seen that's by the top of the stairway here. That is where I put things, we put things. It's a shared agreement now of the people in the house. It's going downstairs. Just, it's on the drum. It goes downstairs when you go. For people who are using that at the bottom of a stairway to go up and you've got a lot of people, you might need like a whole basket to contain the things. It might not work to just set an item or two, and I don't recommend putting it on the stairs. My drum is sort of effectively a basket or a side bench. But play this game with yourself. Start to just practice how much stuff, how much clutter, how many thoughts are moving through my head that don't have to, because I have stuff on horizontal surfaces that maybe belongs there but needs a container, like my remotes, right? Or doesn't belong there and needs to live somewhere else, and I need to figure out what that place is, and then try and ask the people who live with me to put those things there. So play the horizontal surface game. Let me know how it goes. If you want to pop me a line, I'd love it. I'm seeing a text that says, I feel this will really help me and my family. Thank you. I wish I could do a one-on-one with my mom. Yeah. Oh, that would be really, really beautiful. You know, I've done a lot of one-on-one decluttering with people. I've only done a couple virtually, but I would absolutely consider doing that. How about we declutter the people out of our life who keep cluttering our beloved space? Yes, well, that's the conundrum, isn't it? You're like, but I really like and love them, so I'll keep them. Let's just see if we can change a few habits, shall we? Oh, thank you. Everybody, I really appreciate your time. I want to be respectful of time. I know I said this would go till 3. So don't feel bad if you just feel complete, feel great. And if you want to sign off because you've got other things to do, but I will be happily available for a few more minutes if anybody's just got things that are bubbling up. Thank you. Oh, you're awesome too. I really appreciate that you guys took this time with me, but also with yourself. It's I know from experience that's a worthwhile investment, that it'll change how you go about decluttering. And if you get stuck somewhere and you can't remember, you know, feel free to watch this video again. I'll be sending you the link, but also you've got that handout from me and you know where to find me. I would love to help move you on. Blessings, everyone. Have fun in the journey. Remember, it all starts with supporting yourself, right? So don't just, when you're tired and overwhelmed with clutter, dive in. Bad idea. It's like shopping when you're hungry. Don't do it. Great question for later. I'll love to hook up with you later on. You know where to find me. Love it. Oh, good. Lots of notes. Excellent. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate all the appreciation. It's very, very mutual. I respect you all so much. Thank you. Blessings. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Have fun. Bye-bye.